Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to this March 23rd, 2015 edition of Nightcast. Our opening story tonight, the Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras is due to meet Angela Merkel in Berlin later to discuss the ongoing Greek financial crisis. Relations between Germany and Greece have soured in recent weeks. Jenny Hill reports.
For years, they've sung together. Greeks and Germans side by side. For this Berlin choir, it's all about striving for harmony. I'm very, very sad, he says, about the state of the relationship between Germany and Greece. Greece was my first home, Germany my second. Both belong to the House of Europe. I'm extremely sad, not least because there's no reason to be in this situation.
And it would seem the German Chancellor agrees. Angela Merkel has warned Europe not to expect too much from this afternoon's meeting with the Greek Prime Minister here in Berlin. But it's understood she's keen to set a new and conciliatory tone after weeks of violent disagreement between the two countries.
Greece should simply announce that it is defaulting, just like Argentina did, within the euro in January 2010. And stick the finger to Germany and say...
And that, many argue, is down to this man, the Greek finance minister. Yanis Varoufakis says Germany's waging a psychological war. The Germans call him the Euro monster. The relationship is, perhaps understandably, sensitive. The German atrocities of World War II, not forgotten. But demands for reparation have irritated Berlin.
We are, and I am concerned, because it is a very, very difficult situation. On nearly economic terms, we have to avoid a Greek default, and we are ready to do so, but we are hearing a tone from Greek which is not creating trust.
Beethoven's Ode to Joy, said to represent peace and unity, values which they hope here will prevail. Jenny Hill, BBC News, Berlin.
Thank you, Jenny. Friends, we have another story on this same thing, another BBC story, not video with it, but I want to read this one to you. It's a BBC news story from today entitled Greek and German leaders meet amid fears Athens may run out of money. The caption with this opening photograph for this story reads, "The Greek Prime Minister is on his first official visit to Berlin for talks with the German Chancellor Angela Merkel." And then the body of the story reads as follows. Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras and the German Chancellor Angela Merkel have struck conciliatory tones at their Berlin summit, but remained vague on how to prevent Athens from running out of money. Mrs. Merkel said she wanted to see the Greek economy grow. Mr. Tsipras said it was better to talk with each other than about each other, to talk with each other rather than about each other. Both countries have been at odds over Greece's efforts to renegotiate the terms of its international bailout. We want Greece to be strong economically. We want Greece to grow, and above all, we want Greece to overcome its high unemployment, the German Chancellor said at a press conference midway through talks, which are due to continue over a working dinner. Angela Merkel said both countries approached the talks as partners in the EU as well as NATO, facing the same geopolitical challenges. Quote, "We both have a vested interest in building cooperation based on trust." As one of 19 Eurozone countries, Germany was in no position to decide whether Greece's reform program was appropriate or not, she said. An international framework to assess this was in place, she added. And the caption with this photograph, friends, reads, "Mr. Tsipras and Mrs. Merkel addressed questions before a second round of talks in the evening." Mr. Tsipras noted that it was almost 5 years since the start of the Greek bailout, which required massive fiscal adjustments in his country. "It has not been a success story," he said, citing a 25% loss in GDP and 60% youth unemployment. Mr. Tsipras stressed the need for dialogue. "It must be our priority to break the stereotypes that have been created over the past few years. Neither are the Greeks lazy, nor are the Germans responsible for all the ills that take place in Greece," he said. "Instead," he added, "both countries should work together to fight corruption, which was, quote, continuing to hold Greece back." Mrs. Merkel said that although some issues were going to be discussed in more detail over dinner, there would not be any new commitments. The success comes after a pledge, not success. The summit comes after a pledge from the European Union, the EU, to provide 2 billion euros. That would be the equivalent of almost £1.5 billion, 1.45 billion pounds to Greece to ease what it called the country's humanitarian crisis. European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker said the 2 billion euro fund would be spent on growth and social cohesion in Greece. But Mrs. Merkel said on Friday that there would be no new money without reforms. And then the caption with this photograph, part of this same news story, friends, reads, "Mr. Tsipras was welcomed with military honors before talks at the Chancellery." Mr. Tsipras has pledged to end austerity. In fact, as you probably well know, that's how he got elected. That's the platform on which he ran for being elected as the new leader of Greece. He said he's pledged to end austerity, but so far his plans have resistance from Greece's EU creditors. At last week's EU summit, Greece promised to meet creditors' demands to present an economic reform package within days to unlock the cash it needs to avoid having having to give up or leave the euro. According to the Financial Times, Mr. Tsipras wrote to Mrs. Merkel on the 15th of March, today's 23rd, just a little more than a week ago, a day and a week ago, outlining Mr. Tsipras wrote to Mrs. Merkel a day and a week ago on March 15, outlining Greece's precarious financial position. In the letter, he wrote that Greece faced a short-term cash flow crisis and might have to choose between paying pensions and wages and meeting debt obligations. Mr. Tsipras seems clear which option he would choose, writing that to add to Greece's social crisis was a prospect that I will not countenance. Now, Greece's proposals so far are as follows: to combat tax evasion, to tackle corruption, to commit not to roll back privatizations already introduced, but to review those not yet implemented, to introduce collective bargaining, stopping short of raising the minimum wage immediately, to tackle Greece's humanitarian crisis with housing guarantees and free medical care for the uninsured, unemployed, with no overall public spending increase, to reform public sector wages to avoid further wage cuts without increasing overall wage bill, and to achieve pension savings by consolidating funds and eliminating incentives for early retirement, not cutting payments. And then another one of those, and there's a few more, reduce the number of ministers from 16 to 10, cutting special advisors and fringe benefits for officials. Now, that's all of those. Friends, I have an analysis at the scene in Berlin. Jenny Hill, BBC News in Berlin. She says, Alexis Tsipras looked preoccupied as he arrived to full military honors to meet the Chancellor of Europe's largest economy and his country's biggest creditor, Germany being Greece's biggest creditor. There was no doubting who held the balance of power during the press conference after his meeting with Angela Merkel, and after the heated rhetoric that's passed between Athens and Berlin in recent weeks. Perhaps it's no wonder his smiles looked a little nervous. The Chancellor had told him over the telephone last week, he said, that it's better to talk together, to talk to one another, not about each other. That was, many here believe, the real purpose of this meeting, to set a new tone in a fraught relationship, she says in this analysis. Both leaders spoke of their commitment to the Eurozone and to discussions held in a spirit of trust. But Chancellor Merkel looked irritated as Mr. Tsipras brought up the subject of war reparations. In fact, all of Germany is not too happy about Greece's recent demands for World War II reparations. And while Angela Merkel maintained that it's not her role to decide what happens to Greece, she did allude to the fact that for Berlin, the bottom line is unchanged. Germany expects the new Greek government to make the reforms it promised in return for financial aid. And friends, that's it. I've told you last night that we would take a look at where key countries stand in relation to the Islamic State, and I want to defer that over to tomorrow night. I could rapidly go through that, but I don't have any photographs along with this story, and there are some good photographs I could download, and I'd like your forbearance. I'd like to defer that over to tomorrow night and cut the program short tonight. So I want to say thank you for joining me here on Nightcast for this Monday night. God willing and the creek don't rise, we'll be back again tomorrow, Tuesday, with the day's current news related to the Bible and prophecy. Until next time, your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying good night and so long, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on COGTV.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the COGTV.org video archive.